It started innocently enough, as these things always do. My wife, Lydia, had been spending more time on her phone, smiling at messages, chuckling at some unseen joke. When I asked, she'd brush it off, claiming it was a group chat with her colleagues. I wanted to believe her. For the better part of 10 years, Lydia had been my partner, my confidant, my world. But something in my gut whispered that this wasn't just about work memes. I was hesitant to act on my suspicions. I've always believed in the sanctity of trust, but there comes a point where trusting someone blindly can make you a fool. That's why I started paying attention. Little things, really. An unfamiliar cologne lingering on her clothes, her suddenly late nights at the office, and her disinterest in the life we had built together. It hurt, but I needed proof before I could confront her. One evening, she told me she was hitting out with her girlfriends for a wine night. I nodded, pretending to accept her story. But as soon as she left, I got in my car and followed her. She went to the bar. She went to the hotel. My hands trembled as I watched her from across the street. She stepped out of her car, smoothing her dress, and walked inside like she had done it 1,000 times before. I waited. 15 minutes later, a man joined her. He was tall, well-dressed, and confident. They shared a laugh before disappearing into the elevator. The betrayal hit me like a freight train. I'd loved Lydia with every fiber of my being, and she'd repaid me with lies. I drove home, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, and waited for her to return. She came back around midnight, smelling faintly of whiskey and musk. When I asked how her night was, she smiled and said it was great. I didn't confront her then. I needed time to process, to plan. I wasn't going to blow up my life in a fit of rage. No, if she wanted to play games, I'd play too. The first step was hiring a private investigator. If I was going to confront her, I needed undeniable evidence. Over the next few weeks, the PI sent me photos and videos that made my stomach churn. Lydia wasn't just seeing this man. She was deeply involved with him. They went to fancy dinners, spent weekends together, and even exchanged gifts. It was surreal, like watching a bad soap opera starring my wife. But the final straw came when I discovered she'd been using our joint savings to fund her escapades. A credit card bill revealed charges for hotel rooms, expensive lingerie, and high-end restaurants, all of it under the guise of work expenses. I'd had enough. One Friday evening, I set the stage. I invited Lydia to a nice dinner at our favorite restaurant. She seemed surprised but pleased, likely thinking I was trying to rekindle the spark in our marriage. She dressed up, looking every bit the woman I'd fallen in love with. But as we sat across from each other, sipping wine and making small talk, I couldn't help but notice how distant she seemed. Her mind was elsewhere, probably with him. When dessert arrived, I slid a manila envelope across the table. She looked at it, puzzled, before opening it. Inside were the photos, credit card statements, and a detailed timeline of her affair. Her face turned ghostly pale as she flipped through the evidence. "What's this?" she stammered. "You tell me," I said, my voice calm but cold. "That's you, isn't it? And that's not the wine bar you claim to be at." She blinked rapidly, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. And then, to my disbelief, she laughed. It wasn't a nervous giggle or an apologetic chuckle. It was a full-throated, mocking laugh. "You've been spying on me?" she said, a smirk playing on her lips. "That's pathetic, Ethan." Pathetic. The word echoed in my ears, stoking a fire I didn't know I had. But I didn't let it show. Instead, I leaned back in my chair and smiled. "You're right," I said. "It is pathetic. But do you know what else is pathetic? Using our hard-earned money to cheat on your husband?" Her smirk faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Look, Ethan, things haven't been great between us for a while. Maybe if you'd paid more attention to me, this wouldn't have happened." Blaming me. Classic deflection. I nodded, pretending to consider her words. "You might have a point," I said. "But here's the thing, I've been paying attention and I've been planning." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "You'll find out soon enough," I said, standing up. "Dinner's on me. Enjoy your evening." I left her sitting there, confusion and fear flickering across her face. That night, I moved out of our house and into a furnished apartment I'd secretly rented. I took only my essentials, leaving behind the memories and heartbreak. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I'd consulted a divorce attorney long before confronting Lydia, and together we executed my plan. I froze our joint accounts, leaving her access only to her personal savings. I canceled the credit cards she'd been abusing and filed for divorce, citing infidelity and financial misconduct. But the real kicker was the house. It was technically in my name, a detail Lydia had overlooked. I'd inherited it from my parents, and she had no claim to it. When the divorce papers were served, she was forced to move out, scrambling to find a place to stay. Her lover didn't take kindly to her sudden financial troubles. Apparently, he wasn't as invested in their love as she'd thought. Within a month, he ghosted her, leaving her alone to face the mess she'd made. I didn't stop there. I'd gathered evidence of her affair not just for the divorce, but also to protect myself from any future claims she might make. The photos, the texts, the receipts, all of it was airtight. When she tried to play the victim in court, claiming I'd been distant and unloving, my attorney laid out the facts. The judge wasn't sympathetic. In the end, Lydia got nothing. No alimony, no share of the house, and no sympathy from anyone who'd heard the story. Her friends distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the fallout. Even her family, who'd once adored me, admitted she'd crossed a line. As for me, I walked away with my dignity intact and a newfound sense of clarity. The betrayal had been devastating, but it also freed me from a toxic relationship I'd been blind to for years. I threw myself into my work, my hobbies, and my friendships, rediscovering the parts of myself I'd lost while trying to keep our marriage afloat. One evening, months after the dust had settled, I received a text from Lydia. It was brief but telling. "I'm sorry for everything. I miss you." I stared at the message, a wave of emotions washing over me. But instead of replying, I deleted it. Lydia had made her choices, and so had I. My life was finally moving forward, and there was no room for the past. Sometimes justice isn't about revenge or making someone pay. It's about reclaiming your power, your self-respect, and your peace. And in that sense, I'd won. For the first time in years, I felt free.